Elizabeth leaves Westminster.
The Queen is crowned, symbol of hope.
Queen Elizabeth rides forth.
Another extraordinary chapter has been written.
When Queen Elizabeth II passed away, the world marked the end of one of the longest and most significant reigns in modern history.
A few moments ago, Buckingham Palace announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
For 70 years, she had embodied continuity, restraint, and a quiet sense of duty that defined the British monarchy for generations. With her passing, attention naturally turned toward the future. In a constitutional monarchy, succession is automatic, but leadership is something that must be prepared for over time. The institution does not change abruptly. It evolves gradually, shaped by those who stand closest to the throne. Among them is a woman who was not born into royal life, yet who now finds herself at its very center. Catherine, Princess of Wales, began her journey far from palace corridors. She was raised in a close-knit family in Berkshire, educated with care and ambition, and introduced to the public eye not through inheritance, but through marriage. Over the past 2 decades, she has moved steadily from university student to royal consort, from private citizen to one of the most recognized women in the world. Her path has not been defined by sudden transformation, but by gradual adaptation. She entered royal life with patience rather than haste, discretion rather than spectacle. In doing so, she has earned a reputation for steadiness at a time when stability carries particular weight. Now, as the monarchy enters a new era, Catherine stands not only as the wife of the heir to the throne, but as a future queen in waiting. This is the story of how she arrived here, of the years that shaped her, the expectations she inherited, and the quiet resolve that has come to define her place within the House of Windsor. Catherine Elizabeth Middleton was not born into privilege in the traditional aristocratic sense, nor was she raised within the orbit of royalty. Her early life unfolded in Berkshire, England, in a household that valued industry, discipline, and ambition rather more than inherited status. She was the eldest of 3 children born to Michael and Carol Middleton, parents whose own story reflected both aspiration and resilience. Michael Middleton came from a family with distant ties to British aristocracy, while Carol's background was rooted firmly in the working class of Northern England. It was an upbringing shaped not by titles but by hard work. Carol, in particular, would go on to build a successful party supplies business from the family home, a venture that required courage, determination, and long hours. The Middletons were not members of the social elite, but they were upwardly mobile, and they invested heavily in their children's education. Catherine attended Marlborough College, one of Britain's most respected independent schools. It was an environment that encouraged confidence, academic discipline, and social ease, qualities that would later prove essential. Friends from that period often described her as steady and composed, not someone who sought attention but someone who carried herself with quiet assurance. In 2001, she enrolled at the University of St Andrews in Scotland. It was here, away from the intensity of London and the expectations of elite society, that she would encounter the man whose future would alter her own. Prince William had chosen St Andrews partly to escape the glare of the British press. As the son of King Charles III and the late Diana, Princess of Wales, he had grown up under extraordinary scrutiny. University life offered him a rare opportunity for relative normality. Catherine and William first moved within the same social circles. They shared friends and eventually accommodation, living alongside others in student housing. By their own account, their relationship began not with spectacle but with friendship. That detail is significant. In royal history, relationships have often been influenced by expectation, timing, or dynastic suitability. This one developed gradually, in the ordinary rhythm of student life. One often recalled moment was a university charity fashion show in 2002, when Catherine walked the runway in a simple black dress. It has since taken on a near-mythical status in royal folklore, though at the time it was merely one evening among many. Yet it marked, perhaps, a subtle shift in how William began to see her. What followed were years of discretion. The press speculated frequently, but public confirmation of their relationship remained limited. Catherine did not give interviews. She did not attempt to cultivate celebrity. In fact, her restraint became one of her defining characteristics. There were periods of uncertainty. In 2007, reports emerged that the couple had separated briefly. Headlines were quick to analyze and, at times, to ridicule. It was during this period that the press coined the nickname Waity Katie, suggesting that she was waiting indefinitely for a proposal. The phrase was dismissive, but in retrospect it underestimated both the complexity of royal life and the deliberation involved. Prince William had witnessed, at close range, the pressures placed upon his mother. He understood the consequences of entering royal life without preparation. When he later spoke of the timing of his engagement, he explained that he wanted Catherine to have a full understanding of what such a life entailed: the scrutiny, the duty, the permanence. It was, in many ways, a cautious approach born from experience. During those formative years, Catherine was invited on private visits to Balmoral, the late Queen Elizabeth II's Scottish estate. Such invitations were not extended lightly. Balmoral has long been regarded as a space where members of the royal family observe one another outside formal ceremony. Integration into that environment suggests trust. It requires not only social ease but an understanding of hierarchy, tradition, and discretion. Gradually, the tone of public commentary began to shift. Where once there had been skepticism, there was increasing recognition of her composure. She demonstrated an ability to withstand scrutiny without retaliation and to remain measured in circumstances that might have provoked others into public defense. In November 2010, while on holiday in Kenya, Prince William proposed. The engagement announcement that followed confirmed what many had long anticipated. Yet it was not simply the proposal itself that captured attention. It was the ring. William presented Catherine with the sapphire and diamond engagement ring that had belonged to his mother, Diana, Princess of Wales. The gesture carried deep symbolism. It linked past and future in a way that was both intimate and public. The comparisons to Diana were immediate and, in some respects, inevitable. However, Catherine's path differed markedly from that of her late mother-in-law. She entered the royal family after nearly a decade of familiarity with its rhythms and expectations. She had observed closely, waited patiently, and prepared quietly. If Diana's story was marked by youth and sudden immersion into royal life, Catherine's was defined by deliberation and gradual integration. There were early challenges. Public speaking did not come naturally. Her first official addresses were careful and somewhat reserved. Critics noted her reliance on notes and her measured delivery. Yet improvement followed steadily. Confidence grew. Experience accumulated. The transformation was neither dramatic nor theatrical, but it was evident. By the time the engagement was formally announced, Catherine Middleton had already undergone years of informal training, not through instruction manuals, but through observation, adaptation, and endurance. She had learned the importance of restraint, the necessity of loyalty, and the value of timing. In many respects, these early years shaped the foundation upon which her later public role would rest. They were not glamorous years, nor were they free from difficulty. But they revealed qualities that would later become central to her identity within the monarchy: patience, steadiness, and an understanding that legitimacy in royal life is earned gradually. As preparations began for the wedding of 2011, it was increasingly apparent that this was not an impulsive union. It was the culmination of nearly 10 years of shared experience. And for those observing closely, it suggested that Catherine was not stepping into royal life unprepared, but entering it with quiet resolve. By the spring of 2011, anticipation had grown far beyond the boundaries of Britain. The forthcoming marriage of Prince William and Catherine Middleton was not merely a society event or even a national celebration. It was, in many respects, a moment of generational transition for the monarchy. On the 29th of April 2011, Westminster Abbey, a place long associated with coronations, funerals, and royal marriages, became the setting for what many described as the most significant royal wedding since that of Charles and Diana 3 decades earlier. Yet this occasion felt markedly different. The union had not been hurried. It was the culmination of nearly 10 years of shared experience. The public had observed their courtship, their separation, their reconciliation, and finally their engagement. There was a sense not of surprise, but of confirmation. In the weeks leading up to the ceremony, subtle decisions revealed something about Catherine's approach to royal life. Rather than spending her final night as an unmarried woman within the walls of a royal residence, she chose to remain at a London hotel with her family. It was a quiet but meaningful signal that her parents and siblings were not to be sidelined by the grandeur of the occasion. The Middletons were not guests on the periphery. They were participants in history. As the morning unfolded, crowds lined the streets of London in scenes reminiscent of earlier royal celebrations. There was pageantry in full display. The household cavalry, the scarlet uniforms, the carriages and procession routes steeped in centuries of precedent. For many older viewers, the spectacle evoked memories of 1981. But where that earlier wedding carried an air of youthful uncertainty, this one seemed steadier, more assured. Catherine arrived at Westminster Abbey alongside her father, Michael Middleton, who walked her down the aisle beneath the vaulted ceilings of the ancient church. The symbolism was clear: a father from a non-aristocratic background escorting his daughter into the heart of Britain's oldest institutions. It represented, in a quiet way, the evolution of the monarchy itself. Her gown, designed by Sarah Burton for Alexander McQueen, struck a careful balance between modern elegance and traditional formality. The lace sleeves and structured silhouette echoed historic bridal styles, yet the overall effect was restrained and contemporary. It did not overwhelm her. Rather, it allowed her composure to remain the focal point. Prince William, dressed in the scarlet uniform of the Irish Guards, stood waiting at the altar with visible emotion. Observers noted the brief exchange between him and his brother, Prince Harry, as Catherine approached, a moment of warmth that reminded viewers that, behind the ceremony, this was a family occasion. The service itself was dignified and measured. Music filled the abbey. Prayers were offered. Vows were exchanged in language that has bound royal couples for generations. And when the Archbishop pronounced them husband and wife, Catherine Middleton formally became Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Cambridge. The title marked more than a change of name. It signified entry into a constitutional role that carries expectation, obligation, and public responsibility. One detail, however, carried particular resonance. During the engagement interview months earlier, William had presented Catherine with the sapphire engagement ring that once belonged to Diana, Princess of Wales. Its presence on her hand during the ceremony linked two eras of royal history, one marked by turbulence, the other, many hoped, by steadiness. The balcony appearance at Buckingham Palace later that afternoon became one of the most widely viewed moments of the day. The newly married couple stepped forward before an enormous crowd gathered below. The cheers were sustained and heartfelt. For a brief moment, the monarchy felt not distant but shared, part of a collective memory being formed in real time. Yet beyond the spectacle, the wedding represented something deeper. It signaled a new partnership at the heart of the institution. William had made clear that he intended to approach his role differently from previous generations, and Catherine's presence beside him suggested continuity grounded in mutual respect. In the days that followed, discussions centered not only on the beauty of the ceremony but on the sense of calm it projected. There was no sense of haste, no atmosphere of uncertainty. Instead, there was the impression of a couple who understood the magnitude of what they were undertaking. For Catherine, the wedding did not mark the end of a journey, but the beginning of public duty in earnest. From that day forward, she would no longer be viewed primarily as a girlfriend or fiancée. She was now a working member of the royal family, expected to represent the crown at home and abroad. The transition was immediate. And while the grandeur of the day will long be remembered, it was the steadiness beneath it, the sense of preparation and mutual understanding, that suggested this marriage was built not simply on romance, but on foundation. Marriage brought Catherine into the public structure of the British monarchy, but integration into the royal family itself required something deeper than ceremony. It demanded understanding, of protocol, of hierarchy, and of the delicate balance between visibility and restraint that defines constitutional royalty. Unlike elected leaders, members of the royal family do not campaign for approval. Their influence depends upon public confidence, and public confidence is cultivated slowly. For Catherine, this meant learning not only how to perform duties, but how to embody continuity. One of the most immediate challenges she faced was comparison. The title Princess of Wales, which she would later assume, carried with it profound historical weight. Even before formally holding that title, the public inevitably measured her against Diana, whose life and legacy remained deeply embedded in national memory. The comparison was both understandable and, in many ways, unavoidable. Yet the differences between the two women were substantial. Diana entered royal life at 19, with limited preparation for its demands. Catherine entered at 29, after nearly a decade of observation and familiarity. Where Diana's early years were marked by rapid immersion and intense media attention, Catherine's path had been gradual. She had, in effect, watched the institution from the outside before stepping fully inside it. This difference shaped public perception over time. In her early months as Duchess of Cambridge, Catherine's official calendar was deliberately measured. There were charitable visits, carefully selected patronages, and formal appearances alongside Prince William. Critics occasionally suggested that her workload was light compared to more senior members of the family. However, royal observers understood that pacing was intentional. Integration is not simply about visibility, it is about sustainability. Queen Elizabeth II, whose reign had been defined by steadiness, was said to have valued preparation over haste. Catherine's gradual assumption of duties reflected that philosophy. Her first public speeches were closely scrutinized. Public speaking did not appear to come naturally. Notes were consulted. Delivery was careful. Some commentators described her as reserved. Yet others viewed this reserve as consistent with the dignity expected of her position. Over time, her confidence became more evident, her tone more assured, her presence more self-contained. Within the family, Catherine's relationship with the late Queen was regarded as respectful and warm. Invitations to accompany Her Majesty to events such as royal ascot and participation in significant national celebrations suggested trust. These gestures were subtle but meaningful. The monarchy operates as much through symbolism as through structure. There was also the matter of family background. For generations, royal spouses had typically emerged from aristocratic circles. Catherine's middle-class upbringing marked a quiet shift. Yet rather than diminishing the institution, many observers felt it reflected a monarchy adapting carefully to contemporary Britain. Her parents were not excluded from major occasions. They were visible and acknowledged. This inclusivity resonated with many members of the public. As the years progressed, Catherine's partnership with William became increasingly central. Together, they presented an image of stability. Public engagements were conducted with measured consistency. Overseas tours were handled with composure. Observers frequently remarked upon their mutual attentiveness, small gestures that suggested unity rather than performance. Inevitably, attention also turned to relationships within the wider family. During the period when William, Catherine, Prince Harry, and Meghan Markle appeared jointly at charitable initiatives, there was public enthusiasm for what seemed a modern, collaborative generation of royals. Later developments would alter that dynamic, but during those early years, the focus remained on collective purpose. Through it all, Catherine maintained a deliberate steadiness. She did not seek to redefine the monarchy through dramatic gesture. Instead, she appeared to understand that institutions endure not through spectacle, but through reliability. In time, her patronages began to reflect deeper personal interests, early childhood development, mental health, addiction awareness. These were not fleeting associations, but long-term commitments that signaled intention. She was shaping a public identity distinct from the one that had preceded her. Perhaps most importantly, she demonstrated adaptability during moments of national difficulty. During the coronavirus pandemic, members of the royal family faced the challenge of remaining visible while physically distant from the public. Catherine's participation in virtual engagements and later initiatives, such as organizing community-focused events, reinforced the perception of a monarchy attempting to remain connected. By the time Queen Elizabeth II passed away in 2022, Catherine was no longer perceived as the young bride of 2011. She had evolved into a senior royal figure in her own right. When she and William walked among mourners in the days following the Queen's death, the symbolism was unmistakable, a new generation stepping forward, not in replacement, but in continuation. Her subsequent assumption of the title Princess of Wales marked another significant moment. The title, once inseparable from Diana's memory, was now associated with Catherine's steadiness and preparation. It was not claimed abruptly, it was inherited as part of the natural succession. In the years since her marriage, Catherine has come to embody a particular style of modern royalty, one that values discretion, partnership, and incremental change. She has not sought to eclipse history. Instead, she has positioned herself within it. For an institution that depends upon continuity, that positioning may prove decisive. As Catherine's confidence within the royal family grew, so too did the clarity of her public focus. Rather than attaching her name broadly across a wide array of causes, she began shaping a portfolio that reflected sustained commitment, particularly in areas connected to early childhood development and mental health. From the outset, her patronage of children's hospices signaled an interest in vulnerable families and long-term care. These visits were often conducted without excessive publicity, yet they demonstrated a consistent presence. Observers noted that she approached such engagements not as formal appearances, but as opportunities for conversation, listening more than speaking. Over time, her attention turned increasingly toward the formative years of childhood. She launched one of the largest early years research initiatives ever undertaken in the United Kingdom, aiming to better understand how experiences in infancy and early development shape adult life. Rather than presenting herself as an expert, she positioned her role as convener, bringing together researchers, practitioners, and families to elevate the conversation. Mental health advocacy also became central to her work. Through collaborative campaigns that encouraged open discussion and reduced stigma, she helped normalize conversations that previous generations often avoided. For an audience that grew up in a more reserved era, this gradual shift toward openness carried particular significance. In recent years, she has supported initiatives addressing addiction awareness, emphasizing that dependency is not a moral failing but a complex human challenge. Her approach has remained measured, firm in principle, yet compassionate in tone. Alongside these commitments, Catherine has supported Prince William's environmental efforts, including the Earthshot Prize, reinforcing the idea of partnership at the heart of their public life. Together, their charitable focus suggests a forward-looking monarchy, attentive not only to ceremony, but to societal well-being. If earlier years established her as a steady presence within the institution, her humanitarian work has allowed her to shape an identity beyond it. It is here that her influence feels most personal, less about title and more about long-term contribution. For many who had watched the wedding of 2011, the question that followed was both natural and historic. When would the next generation arrive? In December 2012, an official announcement confirmed that the Duchess of Cambridge was expecting her first child. The news was received with genuine warmth across the United Kingdom and well beyond it. A royal pregnancy, particularly one involving the direct line of succession, carries a constitutional significance that extends beyond private joy. It signals continuity. The early stages were not without difficulty. Catherine was hospitalized briefly with severe morning sickness, and the announcement came sooner than originally intended because of her admission. Even in that moment, the tone surrounding the news was measured and protective rather than theatrical. It reminded the public that, despite titles and ceremony, pregnancy remains a human experience. On the 22nd of July 2013, Catherine gave birth to a son at St. Mary's Hospital in London, the same hospital where Prince William himself had been born. The child, named George Alexander Louis, became third in line to the throne. Scenes outside the hospital were reminiscent of earlier royal milestones. Crowds gathered patiently. Media organizations from around the world positioned themselves in anticipation of the first appearance. Yet the atmosphere felt celebratory rather than intrusive. There was a sense that this was not simply a media event, but a shared national moment. When William and Catherine emerged from the Lindo wing to introduce their son to the world, the image was striking in its simplicity. Catherine, composed despite having given birth only hours earlier, held the newborn wrapped in a white blanket. William stood beside her, visibly proud yet protective. It was a moment layered with memory. Many recalled a similar scene in 1982, when Charles and Diana presented a newborn William on those very steps. History had turned a quiet circle. William's brief remarks to the waiting press were characteristically understated. He spoke of sleepless nights ahead and of the joy of becoming parents. There was no grand rhetoric, only the acknowledgement of a new responsibility. The birth of Prince George marked more than the arrival of a child. It confirmed that the future of the monarchy had moved one generation further forward. The line of succession was secure, and with it came reassurance for those who view the monarchy as a stabilizing thread in national life. For Catherine, motherhood altered public perception in subtle ways. She was no longer solely a royal consort, she was now a mother raising a future king. Observers began to note her hands-on approach. Appearances at public engagements often included small glimpses of ordinary parenting, adjusting a coat, steadying a toddler, offering reassurance. These gestures, modest though they were, resonated strongly with many viewers who recognized the universal nature of family life. In 2018, the birth of Prince Louis would further expand their family. But it was the arrival of George that first transformed Catherine's role within the institution. She had entered royal life through marriage. She was now bound to it through motherhood. For older generations who had witnessed the transitions from George VI to Elizabeth II, and from Elizabeth to Charles, the birth of Prince George represented something enduring. The monarchy had faced public questioning in past decades, yet here was visible continuity, a reminder that the institution does not exist only in ceremony, but in lineage. And for Catherine, it marked the beginning of perhaps her most personal chapter, balancing public duty with private devotion under the unblinking gaze of history. In May 2015, Kensington Palace announced that the Duchess of Cambridge had given birth to a daughter. Once again, the steps of St. Mary's Hospital became the setting for a moment watched across the world. This time, however, the symbolism carried a new and distinctly modern dimension. The child was named Charlotte Elizabeth Diana, a name that paid tribute both to her grandfather, King Charles III, and to the late Queen Elizabeth II, as well as to Diana, Princess of Wales. It was a deliberate weaving of generations into a single identity. Yet beyond sentiment, Princess Charlotte's birth represented a constitutional milestone. In 2013, the rules governing royal succession had been amended to end the centuries-old system of male primogeniture, under which a younger son would displace an elder daughter in the line of succession. Under the revised legislation, the eldest child, regardless of gender, would retain their position. This reform meant that Princess Charlotte would remain ahead of her younger brother in the line of succession. For many observers, particularly those who had witnessed profound social change over the decades, this adjustment signaled a monarchy adapting carefully to contemporary values without abandoning tradition. Charlotte's position was not symbolic alone, it was structural. When William and Catherine appeared outside the hospital holding their newborn daughter, the atmosphere was both celebratory and calm. There was familiarity now, a rhythm to these appearances. Yet there was also the sense that the young family was settling into its role with increasing confidence. In 2018, the arrival of their third child, Prince Louis, completed the immediate family circle. By then, Catherine had grown visibly assured in balancing motherhood with public duty. Observers frequently remarked upon the natural ease with which she managed both spheres, participating in official engagements while maintaining an evident closeness with her children. For older generations, these scenes carried echoes of earlier royal households. Yet there was a distinct difference in tone. William and Catherine emphasized privacy for their children more firmly than previous eras had allowed. School drop-offs, carefully controlled photographs, and limited public exposure suggested a desire to provide as normal an upbringing as circumstances permitted. As the children grew, so too did Catherine's responsibilities. The years following the birth of Charlotte and Louis saw her assume an increasingly senior role within the royal family. Her charitable initiatives deepened, her public speaking strengthened, and her presence at state occasions became more prominent. What had once been cautious participation evolved into confident representation. Then, in September 2022, the monarchy entered a moment of profound transition with the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. For those who had lived through the entirety of her reign, the loss was personal as well as national. The days that followed were marked by solemnity and reflection. During public appearances in the period of mourning, Catherine stood beside Prince William as he greeted well-wishers and met members of the public. The symbolism was unmistakable, a new generation stepping into clearer focus. Shortly thereafter, William was created Prince of Wales, and Catherine assumed the title Princess of Wales. It was a title inseparable in memory from Diana, yet it now entered a new chapter. For Catherine, it represented both honor and responsibility, a recognition that her years of preparation had led to this point. Unlike in earlier decades, the transition was measured and composed. There was no rush to redefine the role. Instead, Catherine appeared to approach it as she had approached every stage of her royal life, steadily, deliberately, and with awareness of its historical weight. In public perception, she had moved beyond the narrative of comparison. She was no longer viewed primarily in relation to the past, but as a central figure in the monarchy's future. Princess Charlotte, growing into her position as a young royal, embodies that future as well. Her place in the line of succession reflects a monarchy shaped by both tradition and reform. And as she stands alongside her brothers at major occasions, she represents continuity for a generation that will one day inherit responsibilities of its own. For Catherine, motherhood and monarchy are now inseparable. She is raising children who are not merely members of a family, but participants in an institution that has endured for over 1,000 years. The balance between protection and preparation is delicate, yet it is one she appears to manage with quiet conviction. As the monarchy continues to evolve under King Charles III, attention naturally turns toward the Prince and Princess of Wales. In them, many see not dramatic transformation, but dependable continuity. Catherine's journey from Berkshire schoolgirl to Princess of Wales has unfolded gradually, without sudden reinvention. It has been marked by patience, adaptation, and an understanding that authority within a constitutional monarchy rests as much on character as on title. For a generation that values steadiness over spectacle, her trajectory offers reassurance. The making of a queen is rarely dramatic. It is incremental. It unfolds over years, sometimes decades. It is shaped by experience, scrutiny, and resilience. Catherine now stands nearer than ever to the role she once observed from a distance. Whether history will one day record her as a defining figure of the modern monarchy remains to be seen. What is clear, however, is that she has positioned herself not through haste, but through preparation. And in an institution built upon continuity, preparation may be the most enduring legacy of all. History rarely announces itself in grand declarations. More often, it advances quietly, through steady hands and patient resolve. Catherine's journey into royal life has not been marked by sudden reinvention, but by gradual preparation. From university student to Princess of Wales, her path has unfolded under constant observation, shaped by experience rather than impulse. As the monarchy continues to evolve in a changing world, its future will depend not only on titles, but on temperament, on those who understand both tradition and the need for careful adaptation. In Catherine, many see a figure who reflects that balance. Whether standing beside her husband at moments of national significance or guiding the next generation within her own family, she represents continuity grounded in composure. The making of a queen is seldom dramatic. It is deliberate. It is sustained. And, above all, it is defined by character. For now, Catherine remains a queen in waiting. But history, as ever, moves forward. February 7, 2026, 3:41 p.m. North Rodeo Drive, Beverly Hills. Meghan Markle stepped out of a black SUV in a custom ivory cape coat, moving with the practiced grace of a woman who expected doors to open before she reached them. This time they didn't. Two stone-faced security guards stepped into her path. No greeting, no apology, no explanation, just a blocked doorway and 10 words. "We have been instructed not to accommodate you at this time." Chanel, a brand that has dressed queens, heads of state, and cultural icons for over a century, had just publicly, deliberately, and permanently shut the door on the Duchess of Sussex on Rodeo Drive with witnesses, with cameras rolling. What follows is the full story. The dossier compiled in Paris, the leaked emails that set this in motion years ago, the boardroom confrontation, the mood board that burned the bridge to ash, and the moment Prince Harry came running only to be turned away with a single wordless shake of the head. This isn't a story about a shopping trip gone wrong. It's the story of how one of the most famous women in the world was systematically erased from the most exclusive industry on earth, and how every warning sign was there long before she reached that door. The moment the world stopped pretending. Let's paint the full picture of what unfolded outside the Chanel Beverly Hills flagship on February 7th. Because the details matter enormously here. Meghan didn't stroll up casually. She arrived the way she always does, orchestrated, intentional, prepared. She expected the usual choreography of high-end luxury retail, a discreet private entrance, a senior boutique manager already waiting, a swift glide into a private suite, and the kind of reverent attention that treats a client not as a customer, but as royalty. What she got instead was those 2 guards and a sentence that was not under any circumstances the decision of a nervous junior employee. Those 10 words, "We have been instructed not to accommodate you at this time," were the direct execution of a mandate signed off months earlier in the limestone headquarters of Chanel on Rue Commune in Paris. This was not a miscommunication. This was not a scheduling conflict. This was not a store closed for a private event. This was the nuclear option. In the high-stakes internal language of Chanel's brand management, the nuclear option is a policy so rare, so absolute, and so final that most employees will never see it enacted in their entire careers. It is reserved for individuals deemed to have violated the house's intellectual trust or created what the brand classifies internally as a PR contamination risk. When it is enacted, it is total. No entry, no appointments, no product loans, no association of any kind. The individual is not turned away. They are erased. And according to multiple witnesses, including staff from the neighboring Dior boutique, who watched the entire scene unfold, what happened next was extraordinary. Meghan froze. Her hand mid-text on her phone stopped moving entirely. Her body stiffened under the California afternoon sun. For several long seconds, the silence on that stretch of Rodeo Drive was absolute. The kind of silence that only happens when something genuinely shocking has occurred and everyone watching is still processing what they just saw. And then the unraveling began. Witnesses describe her starting to pace back and forth across the pavement like a wind-up toy with no off switch. Her voice rose. She pulled out her phone and placed a call to Prince Harry. Bystanders standing close enough reported hearing her words clearly. She was swearing that people would be fired, that nobody had the right to humiliate her this way, that they had absolutely no idea who they were dealing with. Think about that for a moment. A woman who survived the internal machinery of the British royal family. A woman who sat across from Oprah and told her story to 50 million viewers. A woman who walked away from one of the most powerful institutions in the world and built a media empire from scratch, standing on a sun-baked Beverly Hills sidewalk, shaking with fury because a fashion house wouldn't let her through the door. But the story was about to get significantly more dramatic. 20 minutes after that phone call, Prince Harry arrived. He stepped out pale-faced, jaw set tight, composure intact but clearly strained. The Duke of Sussex, carrying a royal title, the Windsor name, and genuine global recognition, walked directly up to the head of Chanel Security and attempted to negotiate entry. He was composed. He was measured. He tried to reason with a man calmly and with authority. The security guard's response was a single, slow, definitive shake of the head. No, not for a duke. Not for a duchess. Not for anyone. By this point, 3 separate bystanders had their cameras rolling. The full 12-minute confrontation was being captured in real time. And as those videos began to spread, a realization slowly dawned on the watching world. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't an overzealous guard acting outside his authority. This was the precise pre-planned public execution of a verdict passed in Paris over a year earlier. The velvet rope hadn't just been pulled back, it had been electrified. Drop a comment right now. Did Chanel go too far, or was this completely justified? We're reading every single response. The nuclear file. What Paris knew. Here is what almost nobody watching that footage understood. The decision to block Meghan Markle was not made in February 2026. It was not made in a moment of crisis or in response to some recent provocation. It was made over a year earlier in the private conference rooms and gilded offices of Chanel's headquarters on Ruckban in Paris, following the careful methodical compilation of what insiders had begun calling the nuclear file. The nuclear file was a dossier, thick, detailed, and devastating, assembled by Chanel's brand integrity unit. A documented pattern of behavior stretching back over 2 years, reviewed at the highest levels of the house, and ultimately signed off by Bruno Pavlovsky, the president of Chanel's fashion division. To understand what was in that file, we need to go back to December 5, 2024. Meghan arrived at the Chanel atelier in Paris under the cover of what her team described as a cultural collaboration visit. On the surface, a prestigious and discreet appointment between an admired public figure and a legendary fashion house. According to 4 former staffers present that day, the atmosphere turned glacial within minutes. Meghan did not arrive as a client. She did not arrive as a guest of the house. She arrived, according to everyone in that room, as though she were the incoming creative director. She demanded access to confidential sketches for the 2025 Métayer d'Art collection, a privilege virtually never extended to outside visitors. When the archivist hesitated, she reportedly began issuing unsolicited directives without being asked. She told the house it should strip away what she called its French stiffness to better connect with a more modern, empathetic audience. She offered opinions on storytelling, on branding, on how the house could evolve to reach consumers it was currently failing to serve. And then came the moment that produced a silence no one in that room ever forgot. She requested that a specific silk trim in development be renamed after her, not as part of a licensing agreement, not in exchange for any commercial deal, simply because, as she apparently communicated, her personal brand was the missing ingredient that Chanel's century-old legacy needed. One staffer, speaking on strict condition of anonymity, recalled the room afterward. She didn't understand that Chanel is not an incubator for celebrity egos. It is a temple. And in a temple, you do not tell the priests how to pray. This visit was not isolated. It was the final entry in a pattern documented since early 2023. The nuclear file included leaked emails in which Meghan's representatives had demanded co-creative credit for a limited edition handbag capsule. Not a partnership proposal, a demand. They weren't asking for a collaboration. They were demanding a seat at the table where the Verhamer family, the private billionaires who owned Chanel outright, had sat for generations. By late December 2024, Pavlovsky signed the Retrait Definitive, the final withdrawal. The decree was total and globally binding. No entry at any location worldwide, no private appointments, no product loans, no association of any kind. Her name was purged from every guest list, every showroom access log, every influencer spreadsheet. Regional directors across every territory received a Tier 1 non-engagement memo. In private, the phrase circulating among senior executives to describe the situation was precise and clinical. Tactically uninsurable, not malicious, not personal, just a cold institutional assessment. Every time Meghan Markle entered a room, the conversation stopped being about the craftsmanship or the clothes. It became about her. For a house that had survived 2 world wars by remaining absolutely above the fray, that was not a quirk to manage. It was an existential threat to eliminate. The mood board war, where it all began. To understand how a duchess ends up blocked on Rodeo Drive, you have to go back 3 years to a period now spoken about in the fashion corridors of Paris and New York in hushed, almost reverent tones. Insiders call it the mood board war. It began in May 2023 when Meghan's business advisor at Archewell initiated contact with Chanel's U.S. press office. The intermediary was a former publicist for Goop, the kind of operator who brokers deals between Hollywood royalty and European luxury institutions. The pitch was audacious, a limited edition humanitarian fashion line. Archewell second Chanel, a blending of Coco Chanel's revolutionary legacy with Meghan's modern cause-driven personal brand. Chanel's public response was careful and polite. Their internal notes from that first meeting were not. Senior executives described the tone of Meghan's team as presumptive and noted a complete lack of appreciation for the century-old brand structure they were supposedly proposing to collaborate with. Despite the private reservations, a formal presentation was scheduled for June 14, 2023. A private conference room in Manhattan overlooking Central Park. The kind of meeting that in different circumstances could have been historic. Instead, it became the moment the bridge began to burn. Meghan arrived with a polished digital presentation. The title slide read, Rimogen Chanel from Exclusivity to Empathy. For the executive sitting across from her, that title alone was a provocation. Chanel's entire brand architecture, its pricing, its positioning, its mystique, its enduring power is built on exclusivity. The suggestion that this needed to be replaced with empathy as a commercial value was not seen as forward-thinking. It was seen as a fundamental misreading of what Chanel is and why it has lasted. The presentation proposed replacing or at minimum sharing the iconic interlocking double C logo with an Archewell floral motif. It pitched eco-conscious handbags for socially conscious younger consumers. And then it reached the moment that stopped the room completely. Meghan suggested naming the flagship piece of the collection the Diana. When a Chanel legal representative asked whether she had received formal approval from the Spencer estate or the royal collection to use Princess Diana's name for a commercial fashion line, Meghan's reported response became the most repeated sentence in fashion industry gossip for the next 2 years. I carry her legacy in my marrow. I do not need a license to honor my own mother-in-law. The room went completely silent. One attendee described the Chanel team as looking as though they had witnessed a genuine sacrilege. In the world of French haute couture, heritage is not raw material for reimagining. It is a sacred trust, one that belongs to history, to craft, and to those designated as its custodians long before any living celebrity arrived on the scene. We want to hear from you right now. Type 1. If you think Meghan's pitch was genuinely visionary and the industry was too rigid to recognize it. Type 2. If you think she crossed a line Chanel had every right to defend, We will address your takes before this video ends. 1 week after that June meeting, things escalated into a full institutional crisis. A mood board developed by the Archewell creative team leaked onto a private fashion forum, then spread rapidly across blind gossip sites. The board featured archival photographs of Princess Diana in Chanel suits overlaid with black and white images of Meghan posed in strikingly similar configurations. The title across the slide read, "From Grief to Glamour, the Heirloom Line." For Chanel's legal office, this was the smoking gun. An internal ethics alert was triggered immediately. A memo circulated to the board read, "This is not brand alignment. This is an attempt at brand appropriation. The individual seeks to use the house as a shield for personal controversy." By July 1, 2023, the decision was finalized. Every regional director received a no-go directive regarding Archewell. No formal rejection letter, no press statement, no explanation. Because in high fashion, the most devastating way to kill a proposal is to simply stop breathing life into it. The project died in total impenetrable silence. And in a leaked email to a private confidant, Meghan reportedly wrote, "They used my name to generate buzz in their internal meetings, then shut the door once they had the data. I will outgrow them. I always do." Paris closes ranks. The industry blacklist. Just 48 hours after the Beverly Hills confrontation, a private round meeting took place that the public was never meant to know about. It was hosted by a key figure in the Kate Colbert, the elite association representing the collective interests of France's most prestigious luxury institutions. The guest list was a comprehensive map of global fashion power. Representatives from LVMH, owners of Dior, Givoni, and Louis Vuitton. The Kering Group, which controls Balenciaga, Saint Laurent, and Bottega Veneta, and Chanel, the privately owned institution that had already made its position unmistakably clear on Rodeo Drive. The decision that emerged was described as surgical in its precision. Until further notice, the Duchess of Sussex was to be removed from all primary guest lists, showroom access logs, and influencer collaboration spreadsheets across every territory and every brand in that room. The collective reasoning, PR, contamination risk. The dominoes fell fast. Dior, which had for years been quietly rumored to be considering Meghan for a major brand ambassadorship, issued an internal directive. Cease all garment loans for public appearances and terminate all engagement with talent managers representing the Sussex estate. Givoni, the house that designed Meghan's 2018 wedding gown, chose total detachment. A source close to their creative team delivered the verdict plainly. "We are focusing on emerging voices and timeless craftsmanship, not recurring political controversies. The 2018 wedding is part of our history. It is not our future." Bauline scrapped an entire planned digital campaign, a series built around digital feminism featuring creative director Olivier Reyning in conversation with the Duchess. Just 4 days before filming was set to begin, the executive who made the call explained it simply. "Every conversation becomes about her grievances, not the clothes. In Paris, we sell a dream. Meghan sells a struggle. The two do not mix." By the middle of February 2026, her name had become a red flag in the private systems of every major stylist and publicist on the circuit. One top European stylist described the new reality with unsettling calm. The moment her name is mentioned to a brand, now there is a long pause, then a polite redirect. That is the industry code for do not ask again. It is professional ghosting on a global scale. The most visible confirmation came when the provisional invite list for Paris Fashion Week, March 4 through 11, 2026, was circulated among the elite media. Meghan Markle was nowhere on it. Not at Dior, not at Chiaelli, not on the guest list for the exclusive after-parties at L'Avenue. For someone whose entire brand is built on the currency of access and visibility, this was not a setback. It was an extinction-level event. I have to pause here and ask you directly. Have you ever seen anything like this? Every major French fashion house simultaneously and quietly deciding that one of the most recognizable women on the planet is no longer welcome. Sound off below. The counterattack and why it failed completely. Here is something essential to understand about Meghan Markle. She is not a woman who absorbs a blow and stays down. When the doors of Chanel slammed shut and Paris followed, she didn't retreat into Monteito and go quiet. She launched a multi-front counteroffensive with everything available to her. Within 24 hours of the Beverly Hills confrontation, her attorney reportedly convened an emergency call with senior partners at a powerhouse New York litigation firm. The objective: explore a defamation or discrimination lawsuit against Chanel for reputational harm. The internal strategy was labeled Project Salvage, and it sought to frame the exclusion as a violation of California's Unruh Civil Rights Act. Multiple legal experts reviewed the proposed claims, including a former California Superior Court judge. Their assessment was unanimous. Evidentiary ghost. There is simply no legal precedent that compels a private fashion house to maintain any relationship with a public figure. Project Salvage was shelved by February 10th. So the legal route was dead. What came next was the narrative war. On the morning of February 9th, Archwell's communications director sent an email to over 40 high-level media contacts. Subject line: an ongoing pattern, women of color in luxury spaces. The email attempted to reframe the Chanel incident as part of a broader systemic narrative, drawing connections to Meghan's past experiences with the British press and suggesting the fashion world's cold shoulder was rooted in unconscious racial bias. The email didn't name Chanel directly, but the context was unmistakable. It was a deliberate attempt to weaponize social justice language against a brand that prides itself on existing above politics. The response from the media was something Meghan's team had almost certainly never encountered before. Collective total silence. Out of 40 outlets contacted, exactly one minor digital publication ran a sympathetic piece. The others, from The Cut to Vogue, simply didn't respond. In 2020, this narrative would have ignited a global firestorm. In 2026, it generated nothing. The world had quietly reached a point of exhaustion. Inside Monte Ito, sources described the atmosphere as one of escalating panic. A senior strategist's leaked WhatsApp message captured the crisis in a single sentence. "We are losing the room. The more we lean into the grievance, the more the brands pull away." And then came the final crushing blow, delivered not by enemies but by the industry itself. On the evening of February 10th, a private email written by Bruno Pavlovsky was anonymously shared on an industry-only server. Written weeks before the Rodeo Drive incident, it read, "There are moments when silence protects the house more than a response. We cannot be expected to absorb chaos for the sake of celebrity. The decision regarding Markle was strategic, not emotional." That leak transformed Meghan from a wounded party into a confirmed liability in the eyes of every major marketing department in Europe. Within days, top-tier PR firms in New York and Paris had added her name to do-not-book spreadsheets. One agency executive put it plainly in an internal Slack thread. "She doesn't move the product anymore. She only moves the headlines in the wrong direction." The empire crumbles. By the second week of February 2026, the fashion blacklist had grown into something far larger. A systemic commercial collapse threatening the foundations of the entire Sussex brand enterprise. Archwell Productions had been in the final stages of a lucrative deal to produce a documentary series exploring the intersection of royal legacy and global fashion. That project is now described by one production executive as dead in the water. Not from lack of creative merit, but because no legacy brand wanted its name attached to a figure whose defining public narrative had become institutional rejection. Plans for a new podcast series were shelved indefinitely when 3 major sponsors withdrew within 48 hours of the Beverly Hills incident. Internal reasoning delivered to stakeholders was blunt and final. Brand toxic. One marketer noted that Meghan no longer moved the needle with consumers who mattered. Instead of inspiration, she generated headlines about litigation and conflict, the two things that make corporate sponsors disappear. Meghan's lifestyle brand, intended to be her most prestigious commercial achievement, remained in production limbo. Reports emerged that thousands of units from her initial product lines were sitting in 2 rented storage units in Santa Barbara, unable to secure a retail partner willing to accept the reputational risk of association. The Archwell Foundation reported 2 major donor withdrawals in the first week of February alone. And in Canada, once one of the couple's warmest international sanctuaries, new polling data revealed something striking. Meghan's favorability rating among her core demographic of women aged 25 to 45 had fallen by 43% since the start of 2026. The analyst behind the study concluded that consumers were no longer connecting with the empowerment narrative when it was consistently overshadowed by what appeared from the outside as a recurring pattern of entitlement and corporate conflict. 43% in weeks. That is not a dip. That is a collapse. Here is the question I want you to sit with. Is there a path back from this for Meghan Markle? What would that even look like? Leave your honest thoughts below. Some of the sharpest analysis we have ever seen has come from this community. Harry's impossible choice. Now, we arrive at the part of this story that has received the least attention and perhaps deserves the most. Because while Meghan's professional world collapsed around her, something else was quietly developing that cuts to the most human dimension of this entire saga. Prince Harry, multiple sources confirm, has begun making discreet private inquiries into a possible path toward institutional re-entry in London. Not a dramatic return to senior working royal duties. A quiet, soft reintegration focused on legacy charitable work and low-profile non-public duties. A carefully managed step back toward the institution he walked away from in 2020. The feedback from the United Kingdom was direct and uncompromising. The word relayed through the offices of Princess Anne and Lady Louise Windsor was simple. Any path back for the Duke hinges on one non-negotiable condition. The Duchess must not be involved. One royal aide speaking to investigators was explicit. The family is willing to consider the son, but they are finished with the disruption. There is no path back for both. It is a choice between duty and the narrative they have built in California. Think about what that means for a moment. Harry, who rushed to Rodeo Drive that afternoon, who stood in that California sunlight and tried to negotiate with a security guard on his wife's behalf, who was turned away with a single wordless shake of the head, is now reportedly torn in a way that goes far deeper than any brand strategy or PR crisis meeting can address. He saw the world stop pretending on February 7, 2026. Standing on that pavement, watching a luxury security guard decline to make an exception for the Duke of Sussex, Harry reportedly realized something he had been avoiding for months. The protection he believed the Sussex brand provided was far thinner than he had allowed himself to believe. The man who walked away from the most storied institution on earth now stands at an impossible junction. The world he chose is fracturing. The world he left has fractionally, cautiously, conditionally left one door slightly open. But the condition attached to that door changes everything about the life he has built since 2020. And only one of them can walk through it. The final verdict. On the evening of February 10, 2026, a lone photograph was shared among a private group of senior fashion editors. It showed the Chanel flagship boutique on Rue Comme after sunset. The iconic limestone facade glowing in the Paris lamplight. The street quiet and empty. And in the window behind the glass, a small elegant placard. Entrance by invitation only. In that single quiet sentence, the fashion world delivered its final verdict. This story is on the surface about fashion, about a blocked doorway on Rodeo Drive, a classified dossier in Paris, a leaked mood board, and a 12-minute standoff the whole world watched in real time. But underneath the leaked emails, the PR strategies, the emergency legal calls, and the do-not-book spreadsheets, this story is about something far more universal. It is a story about the difference between power and access, between fame and respect, between disruption as creative force and disruption as liability, between believing you understand an institution and actually understanding it. Meghan Markle arrived on the world stage with a conviction that celebrity was the master currency of the modern age. That enough visibility, enough narrative leverage, enough perfectly timed viral moments could open every door and bend every room. She believed, not without some justification, that the rules of the old world were simply waiting to be rewritten by someone willing to challenge them loudly enough. What she discovered in 2026 is that some institutions are not waiting to be disrupted. They are not threatened by noise. They are not impressed by follower counts, streaming deals, or humanitarian branding exercises. They have survived 2 world wars. They have outlasted empires and economic collapses and decades of seismic cultural upheaval. They have dressed the most powerful women in modern history. And when those women began to believe they were bigger than the dress, bigger than the house, bigger than the century of trust and craft the brand represents, the institution simply, quietly, and irrevocably moved on. As one industry veteran put it, in this world, doors open silently, but when they close, they echo for a long time. By the middle of February 2026, every door in Paris had echoed. The 12 minutes of silence on Rodeo Drive had become permanent. Not a headline, not a controversy to be managed with a well-timed press release. A permanent reality. The kind that takes years to construct and cannot be reversed by any viral moment, any curated leak, or any rebranding exercise a communications team can devise. The chapter of Meghan Markle in the world of haute couture has ended not with a lawsuit, not with a headline, not with a press statement from either side. It ended with the turning of a key, with the absolute unyielding centuries reinforced power of a single word. No, the question now, and it is the question that will define the next chapter of the story, is whether what has been broken can ever be rebuilt. Whether the woman who wanted to reimagine the most exclusive houses in the world can find a way to understand them on their own terms first. Whether Harry will ultimately choose duty or California, and whether in the long silence that has settled over Montecito, anyone inside those walls is finally asking the one question that might actually matter. Not how do we fight back, but what did we get wrong? Those answers don't exist yet, but when they emerge, you will hear about them here first. Before you go, this channel runs on your support. If this investigation gave you something real to think about, hit the like button right now. It costs you 2 seconds, and it tells us you want more of this depth of reporting. Subscribe if you're new here. We cover the stories that live underneath the headlines, the ones that don't fit in a tweet, that require context, patience, and sources who are actually willing to talk. And leave us with your final verdict. One comment, one honest answer to the question at the center of all of this. Is Meghan Markle a visionary disruptor who got crushed by gatekeepers too afraid of change to see what she was offering? Or is she a cautionary tale about what happens when ambition outpaces self-awareness, and when someone confuses access with acceptance? We want to know what you think. Drop it below. We will see you in the next one. February 7th, 2026. 3:41 p.m. Rodeo Drive. A black SUV door opens, cameras lift, and what should have been a routine private entrance becomes a public refusal. 10 words from a security guard echo louder than any headline. What happened in those 12 minutes didn't begin in Beverly Hills, and it won't end there. She arrived the way global figures arrive when the choreography has been rehearsed for years. The vehicle slowed precisely at the curb outside the Chanel flagship. An assistant stepped out first. The afternoon sun hit polished stone. A discreet entrance waited just beyond the main doors, the kind reserved for high-profile clients who prefer privacy to spectacle. That, at least, was the expectation. Instead, 2 security guards stepped forward. No greeting. No visible hesitation. No consultation with a manager inside. Just a quiet block of the doorway and a sentence delivered with professional calm. They had been instructed not to accommodate her at this time. For a few seconds, nothing moved. On Rodeo Drive, where attention is currency and status is oxygen, stillness is rare. Bystanders sensed it immediately, that peculiar silence that settles when something socially unthinkable has just occurred. This was not a paparazzi scuffle. Not a scheduling mishap. Not a misunderstanding that could be corrected with a phone call to the right executive. The refusal was clean, practiced, final. Her posture stiffened. A hand that had been mid-text froze. Witnesses would later describe the shift as subtle but visible, the difference between someone expecting deference and someone confronting an unexpected barrier. She asked for clarification. The response did not change. Inside the boutique, no one rushed forward. No manager appeared to smooth things over. The guards held their position as though executing instructions that required no improvisation. It was not confrontation. It was enforcement. Phones came out. Not from her team, from the sidewalk. In Beverly Hills, public moments metastasize instantly. A whisper becomes footage. Footage becomes narrative. Within minutes, small clusters of onlookers began recording. The optics were stark. A duchess outside a luxury house, denied entry. She made a call. 20 minutes later, another vehicle pulled up. Prince Harry stepped out with visible urgency, his expression controlled but tight. He approached the security lead directly. There was no raised voice, no theatrical gesture. Just a measured attempt to understand what authority had issued the instruction and whether it could be reconsidered. The answer was delivered without words. A slow shake of the head. Titles carried no leverage here. The exchange lasted only moments, but the symbolism was heavy. In that space, between European heritage luxury and modern celebrity power, hierarchy had drawn its own line. To understand why those doors remained closed, You have to step away from California sunlight and back into Paris boardrooms months earlier. Because institutions of this scale rarely act impulsively. They deliberate. They document. They assess risk not in headlines, but in decades. According to multiple industry insiders, the decision that played out on Rodeo Drive was not spontaneous. It was the visible endpoint of a private evaluation that had been underway for more than a year. Senior executives within the fashion division had reviewed what they characterized as a pattern of engagement, interactions, proposals, communications, that, in their view, created what they termed reputational volatility. Luxury houses do not fear controversy the way mass-market brands do. They survive it. They absorb it. But they are deeply protective of narrative control. Every collaboration, every ambassador, every association is filtered through a singular question. Does this strengthen the mythology, or does it redirect it? In late 2024, meetings reportedly took place in Paris concerning a proposed cultural collaboration. On paper, the concept aligned with modern philanthropic messaging, heritage craftsmanship intersecting with contemporary humanitarian themes. But inside the presentations, tensions surfaced. Executives described concerns about positioning, about branding emphasis, about who, precisely, would be centered in the story being told. When you steward a century-old house, the hierarchy of narrative is not negotiable. The brand is the protagonist. Individuals orbit it. By early 2025, according to one source familiar with internal communications, a formal non-engagement directive had been circulated across regions. It was quiet. No press release. No public statement. Just a note embedded in operational systems. No appointments, no loans, no official association. In luxury, the most definitive rejection is silence. So when February 7th unfolded, it was not a flare of emotion. It was execution of policy. The guards on Rodeo Drive were not improvising, they were implementing. Still, the human dimension cannot be ignored. Public refusal carries a different weight than private disengagement. Whatever deliberations had occurred in Paris, what the world saw was simpler and more visceral: access denied. By evening, footage from the sidewalk had spread across social platforms. Commentary polarized instantly. Some viewed it as institutional arrogance, a relic of exclusivity resistant to evolution. Others interpreted it as a boundary finally enforced after years of blurred lines between celebrity and heritage. But beneath the noise, a more strategic reality was emerging. When a brand of that magnitude makes a move so visibly firm, it signals not only to one individual, but to an entire ecosystem. Stylists, publicists, sponsors, rival houses. The message is less about emotion and more about alignment. The question was no longer whether one boutique had closed its doors. The question was what Paris had already decided, and who else would follow. If Rodeo Drive was the visible spark, Paris was the quiet ignition point. Months before those doors remained closed in Beverly Hills, a series of internal meetings had already reshaped the landscape. In the limestone headquarters on Rue Cambon, senior executives gathered not to debate personalities, but to protect positioning. Luxury at that level is not reactive. It is preemptive. It studies trajectories. It models risk. And above all, it safeguards narrative sovereignty. The concern, according to individuals familiar with the discussions, was not a single incident. It was cumulative optics. Over the previous 2 years, conversations between representatives of the Duchess and various fashion houses had followed a similar arc: initial enthusiasm, exploration of collaboration framed around humanitarian alignment. Then friction, subtle at first, over brand emphasis, creative direction, and public positioning. In one early 2023 outreach, a proposal was floated for a limited capsule collection blending archival design codes with modern philanthropic storytelling. On paper, it was commercially viable. Celebrity collaborations have long fueled luxury growth, particularly in North America. But the internal notes from that exploratory phase reportedly flagged a strategic tension. Who was anchoring the story? For a heritage house, identity is not shared casually. The logo is not decoration, it is doctrine. Every campaign reinforces a mythology built over decades, often centuries. Executives worried that the proposed framing risked shifting the gravitational center away from the house and toward the personality attached to it. The phrase one insider used was narrative displacement. That concern intensified during a private presentation in Manhattan in mid-2023. The concept introduced that day suggested reframing exclusivity as empathy, broadening the emotional accessibility of a brand historically defined by mystique. The creative ambition was clear, but to traditionalists within the room, it signaled a philosophical mismatch. Exclusivity in haute couture is not exclusion for its own sake. It is architecture. It sustains aspiration. To dilute it is not merely to evolve, it is to alter structural foundations. There was also the question of symbolic associations. A proposed product name invoking Princess Diana surfaced during discussions, intended, according to sources, as homage. Legal teams immediately raised caution. Heritage houses are meticulous about intellectual property and royal affiliations. Even the perception of leveraging legacy for commercial storytelling requires layers of approval. What might have been seen by one side as tribute was interpreted by the other as potential entanglement. After that meeting, momentum slowed. Emails became less frequent. Follow-ups more measured. The proposal did not receive a formal rejection, but it stopped advancing. In the world of European luxury, silence often communicates more definitively than confrontation. Behind the scenes, risk assessments continued. Executives examined not only brand alignment, but volatility metrics, media cycles, public sentiment trends, corporate partnerships already under strain. The Sussex narrative, from royal departure to streaming deals to memoir revelations, had generated extraordinary attention. Attention drives visibility. But visibility is not always stabilizing. For houses that sell permanence, unpredictability is expensive. By late 2024, a more formal review was underway. Brand integrity teams compiled summaries of prior interactions. Not as indictment, insiders insist, but as due diligence. They examined whether any future partnership would amplify craftsmanship or redirect focus toward external controversy. One executive reportedly articulated the dilemma bluntly. Every time she enters a room, the story becomes about her. That observation is not inherently negative in Hollywood. Star power can eclipse product and drive sales. But in Parisian couture culture, eclipsing the house itself is the cardinal risk. The decision that emerged was described internally as protective rather than punitive. A non-engagement directive circulated quietly across regional offices. It did not mention personal grievances. It did not assign moral judgment. It simply restricted formal association. Globally, such directives are rare, but not unprecedented. Luxury conglomerates share informal intelligence through stylists, PR agencies, and event curators. When one house signals concern, others pay attention. Within weeks of the Rodeo Drive incident, conversations reportedly expanded beyond a single brand. Representatives from major groups, LVMH, Kering, and independent houses, began reassessing existing or rumored affiliations. Not because of public pressure, but because institutional alignment is collective. The ecosystem protects itself. Dior, long rumored to be considering a larger ambassadorial relationship, paused garment loans. A planned digital feature exploring modern femininity was quietly shelved. Balmain postponed a filmed conversation. None of these decisions were announced publicly. They simply evaporated. In luxury, reputational recalibration happens without press releases. The ripple effect extended to Paris Fashion Week planning sessions. Guest lists are curated months in advance. Invitations are symbolic capital. As lists circulated in early 2026, observers noted the absence. For some, this was evidence of coordinated exclusion. For others, it reflected risk management in a climate where brands were increasingly cautious about political and social entanglements. Meanwhile, legal advisors in California examined potential recourse. Could exclusion from a private boutique constitute discrimination? Experts reviewed precedent. The consensus was sobering. Private entities retain broad discretion over association. Litigation would invite scrutiny, not resolution. Parallel to legal exploration, communications teams explored narrative reframing. An email circulated to select media contacts, positioning the incident within a broader conversation about women of color navigating elite spaces. The argument resonated with some digital commentators. But major fashion publications remained largely silent. Industry fatigue, one editor suggested privately, had set in. Audiences, they believed, were less responsive to cyclical grievance framing than they had been several years earlier. Inside Montecito, strategic recalibration intensified. Sponsorship partners grew cautious. A planned documentary concept intertwining royal history and fashion heritage lost momentum as potential collaborators hesitated. Advertisers prefer stability. Controversy complicates underwriting. Market analysts began tracking favorability metrics among key consumer demographics. Early 2026 polling suggested erosion among previously supportive segments. Not catastrophic, but noticeable. For lifestyle branding, perception shifts compound quickly. Still, it would be simplistic to interpret these developments as a singular downfall narrative. Brand trajectories are fluid. Public memory is short. Reinvention is possible. Yet the structural tension remains. Celebrity influence operates on velocity. Heritage luxury operates on continuity. When velocity collides with continuity, friction is inevitable. The Rodeo Drive refusal crystallized that friction into a visual symbol, but the architecture had been built long before. Executives in Paris were not reacting to 12 minutes on a sidewalk. They were responding to a multi-year pattern of negotiation over narrative control. And in institutions that measure time in decades rather than trending cycles, control is non-negotiable. The question now is not whether a single boutique denied entry. It is whether two fundamentally different models of power, modern celebrity leverage and century-old institutional authority, can coexist without one destabilizing the other. Because when an ecosystem as interconnected as global luxury begins to recalibrate, the consequences extend far beyond one afternoon in Beverly Hills. 48 hours after the Rodeo Drive incident, the silence began to organize itself. Not publicly. Not through statements. Through calls. In Paris, New York, and Milan, a sequence of private conversations unfolded between communications directors, legal advisors, and brand presidents. Luxury houses do not need formal alliances to understand one another. Their ecosystem is interconnected through stylists, ateliers, advertising agencies, and the unspoken code that governs access. When one institution draws a boundary, others evaluate whether the logic applies to them as well. The phrase circulating in multiple boardrooms was cautious but clear: reputational exposure. It was not about personal dislike. It was about volatility. Over the previous 5 years, any association with the Sussex narrative had carried an unpredictable aftershock, headlines extending beyond fashion into geopolitics, family estrangement, media feuds, documentary revelations, memoir disclosures. For streaming platforms, that intensity translated into engagement. For couture houses built on serenity and permanence, it threatened to redirect the frame. Luxury does not sell conflict. It sells aspiration uninterrupted by chaos. Within a week, quiet adjustments were underway. A rumored ambassadorship discussion paused indefinitely. A planned photo shoot exploring modern royal style was placed under review. A digital campaign centered on cross-cultural philanthropy dissolved before contracts were finalized. None of it required public cancellation. The meetings simply stopped appearing on calendars. This is how institutional distancing works. It is administrative, not dramatic. Simultaneously, advisors in California initiated what one strategist privately labeled stabilization protocol. First, legal review. Attorneys examined whether the Beverly Hills refusal could be interpreted as discriminatory under California civil rights statutes. The answer, delivered without flourish, was unambiguous. Private entities are not compelled to extend hospitality absent contractual obligation. Litigation would expand coverage rather than contain it. Next came narrative recalibration. Communications teams explored positioning the incident within broader discussions of race, gender, and gatekeeping in elite industries. Draft statements were prepared but not released. Select journalists received background briefings suggesting that patterns of exclusion deserved scrutiny. The response from major fashion publications was restrained. Editors, increasingly cautious about becoming conduits for corporate disputes, declined to escalate the framing without documentary evidence. By February 10, the internal mood had shifted from indignation to concern. Brand partnerships depend on perceived upward momentum. Sponsors ask a simple question: does association enhance stability? When visibility becomes synonymous with friction, the calculus changes. 3 mid-tier sponsors connected to upcoming content projects quietly withdrew, citing strategic realignment. A lifestyle retail collaboration scheduled for late spring postponed distribution discussions. Warehoused inventory waited for placement. None of this was catastrophic in isolation. But momentum in branding is cumulative. Once velocity slows, perception follows. Inside industry circles, a more philosophical debate emerged. Had celebrity culture reached saturation within heritage fashion? For over a decade, houses had courted Hollywood aggressively, aligning red carpet moments with quarterly sales goals. But the pendulum had begun to swing. Post-pandemic consumers showed renewed appetite for craftsmanship over spectacle. The quiet luxury trend, understated, logo-light, heritage-heavy, reflected fatigue with overt narrative drama. In that climate, unpredictability was less alluring. Yet reducing the shift to fashion cycles alone would oversimplify the stakes. What truly unsettled executives was narrative sovereignty. Over the years, the Duchess had demonstrated fluency in media leverage. Interviews, streaming documentaries, podcast platforms, she understood amplification. That skill, powerful in entertainment contexts, introduced asymmetry in luxury negotiations. If conflict emerged, the celebrity possessed megaphones. The house preferred silence. Institutions designed to outlast centuries avoid asymmetric risk. By mid-February, an additional complication surfaced: public sentiment data. Market research firms tracking favorability among affluent female consumers noted a measurable dip. Not universal disapproval, but erosion. Analysts attributed the shift less to ideology than to fatigue. Consumers drawn initially to a narrative of independence expressed discomfort with recurring public disputes. Perception, once cracked, requires deliberate restoration. Meanwhile, transatlantic dynamics intensified the complexity. In London, royal commentators observed the unfolding fashion estrangement as emblematic of broader isolation. Private conversations reportedly explored whether limited institutional reintegration for Prince Harry might stabilize brand optics. The premise was delicate: charitable engagements, heritage-focused appearances, low-visibility service work. Feedback from palace channels was cautious. Trust, once strained publicly, is not rebuilt through urgency. For the Duke, the implications were personal. Public solidarity on Rodeo Drive had been instinctive. But strategic evaluation demanded broader reflection. What did partnership mean when commercial friction intersected with familial fracture? Loyalty in marriage is clear. Loyalty within monarchy is layered. Back in Paris, the ripple effects continued. Invitations for upcoming Fashion Week events circulated without controversy. Absence speaks softly, but decisively. Stylists advising A-list actresses recalibrated wardrobes toward houses signaling stability. Influencer engagement teams updated internal notes, flagging associations that might invite distraction. This was not a coordinated blacklist in the dramatic sense. It was systemic self-protection. By late February, the conversation shifted from incident to trajectory. Commentators asked whether reinvention might emerge from distance, independent ventures untethered from legacy houses. Direct-to-consumer platforms offer autonomy. Social media allows curated storytelling. Influence can exist outside couture corridors. But the distinction between influence and access lingered. Access to heritage institutions confers symbolic legitimacy. When that access narrows, narrative recalibration becomes unavoidable. In private strategy sessions, advisors confronted an uncomfortable reality. Fighting the exclusion publicly risked reinforcing it. Silence, however, could be interpreted as concession. Every pathway carried cost. And beneath commercial calculus lay a subtler question, one rarely voiced aloud. Had the modern celebrity model reached its structural limit within institutions that measure relevance in centuries rather than trending cycles? If so, the confrontation on Rodeo Drive was not an anomaly. It was a boundary marker. Because when continuity meets velocity, one must adapt. The coming months would reveal whether adaptation meant confrontation, reinvention, or retreat. By early March, the consequences had migrated from fashion into broader enterprise. Archival projects once framed as cultural bridges, exploring intersections between royalty, philanthropy, and style, stalled in development meetings. Streaming executives, sensitive to audience fatigue, hesitated to commission narratives perceived as extensions of ongoing dispute. Investors in lifestyle ventures requested updated risk assessments before releasing additional capital. Momentum had not vanished. It had paused. Inside brand advisory circles, consultants dissected the episode as a case study in modern power dynamics. The central tension was not personal animosity but structural mismatch. Celebrity influence thrives on immediacy, on emotional resonance, on transparency that disrupts hierarchy. Heritage institutions thrive on opacity, on ritual, on continuity shielded from emotional volatility. When those paradigms collide, friction is almost guaranteed. Publicly, supporters framed the exclusion as elitist rigidity, evidence that traditional houses resist democratization. Critics interpreted it as overdue boundary enforcement. The binary debate obscured nuance. Both perspectives contained fragments of truth. Luxury does guard its gates. It must. Its value depends on selective permeability. Yet modern consumers increasingly demand ethical alignment and cultural evolution. Balancing those imperatives is delicate. What complicated this scenario was visibility. Had the non-engagement directive remained invisible, recalibration might have unfolded quietly. Instead, the visual of refusal created narrative crystallization. Images simplify complex negotiations into symbolic verdicts. A closed door is easier to process than a series of emails. In Montecito, strategic advisors confronted three options. First, confrontation, legal escalation, public advocacy, reframing exclusion as systemic bias. Second, reconciliation, private outreach to rebuild trust through humility and lower-profile engagement. Third, redirection, pivot entirely away from legacy luxury toward independent brand ecosystems untethered from European gatekeepers. Each pathway implied identity recalibration. Confrontation risked entrenchment. Reconciliation required concession. Redirection demanded relinquishing certain symbolic currencies. For Prince Harry, parallel deliberations intensified. Charitable initiatives connected to veterans and mental health remained central to his identity. Some advisors suggested that demonstrating sustained, low-visibility service could restore equilibrium with British institutions over time. Yet any movement toward reintegration invited interpretation as retreat. Public narratives rarely allow complexity. Meanwhile, fashion houses observed from measured distance. None issued statements. None needed to. The ecosystem had already signaled recalibration. Invitations to private salons emphasized heritage ambassadors and emerging designers rather than polarizing public figures. Campaign aesthetics leaned further into understatement. The broader cultural shift toward quiet luxury gained momentum. Neutral palettes, subtle logos, craftsmanship foreground over celebrity endorsement. Analysts debated whether the Sussex episode accelerated that shift or merely coincided with it. Either way, symbolism mattered. By late March, attention cycles began drifting toward other headlines. Media ecosystems are restless. Yet within executive suites, the memory persisted. Risk models adjust slowly. Trust rebuilds more slowly still. The deeper lesson was not about one duchess or one house. It was about the evolving architecture of influence. Celebrity once functioned as a universal solvent, dissolving institutional barriers. Social platforms amplified individual voice to rival corporate messaging. But institutions that predate digital culture possess resilience rooted in time. They can afford patience. Reinvention remains possible for any public figure. Cultural memory is shorter than strategic memory. But reinvention requires recalibration of posture. Influence untethered from access may flourish differently, through independent ventures, philanthropic authenticity, creative autonomy. What the Rodeo Drive moment exposed was not permanent exile, but structural negotiation. The door that closed did so quietly. No press conference. No manifesto. Just policy enacted. Whether future doors open will depend less on confrontation and more on alignment, on understanding that in certain corridors, legacy is not a backdrop. It is the foundation. And foundations, once tested, do not shift easily. By the time March settled into April, the noise had faded, but the implications had not. Public memory moves fast. Institutional memory does not. In Montecito, the rhythm of daily life continued. Meetings were held. Advisors drafted options. Brand architects mapped potential pivots. On the surface, nothing dramatic. No press conferences. No retaliatory exposés. But beneath that composure, something more consequential was unfolding. Strategic reckoning. Because this was never only about fashion. It was about access. For years, the Sussex strategy had operated on a simple modern premise. Visibility equals leverage. Interviews, documentaries, podcasts, public speeches. The more visible the narrative, the stronger the influence. And in many arenas, that model worked. Media platforms reward bold storytelling. Streaming deals reward intensity. Headlines reward conflict. But heritage institutions operate on an inverse equation. Restraint equals power. The more silent the house, the more enduring the mystique. When those two equations collided, something had to give. The Rodeo Drive refusal crystallized a truth that had been forming quietly in executive suites for years. Celebrity can open many doors, but not all of them. Not the ones built on centuries of guarded continuity. Not the ones that believe permanence outweighs popularity. And that realization rippled beyond couture. Streaming partners recalculated projected audience growth. Sponsors revisited brand safety matrices. Philanthropic donors reassessed alignment risk. None of it was explosive. None of it required headlines. It was simply the slow tightening of corporate caution. Momentum doesn't always collapse. Sometimes it erodes. Meanwhile, in London, conversations reportedly continued behind closed doors. The possibility of limited reintegration for Prince Harry, structured, controlled, purpose-driven, hovered as a distant option. Not a grand return. Not a balcony appearance. Just a recalibrated presence anchored in service rather than spectacle. But even that hypothetical path carried a condition understood by all sides. Institutional stability cannot coexist with perpetual narrative volatility. For Harry, the crossroads was deeply personal. Loyalty to a spouse. Loyalty to legacy. Identity shaped by departure, now confronted with the cost of distance. The image of him standing on that Beverly Hills pavement, composed, diplomatic, ultimately refused, lingered as metaphor. Titles do not override policy. Emotion does not override structure. In Paris, the boutiques continued glowing under evening light. Campaigns launched. Collections debuted. The industry did what it has always done, moved forward without commentary. No victory lap. No condemnation. Just continuation. And that continuation is the quiet power most underestimated. Institutions survive because they do not chase every headline. They absorb turbulence and wait. In time, the storm passes. The brand remains. The larger cultural question, though, remains unresolved. Can a modern public figure, forged in the era of social amplification and narrative ownership, coexist symbiotically with institutions that demand narrative submission? Is there a middle ground between disruption and deference? Perhaps. But coexistence requires recognition of hierarchy. In haute couture, the house is sovereign. In monarchy, the crown is sovereign. In celebrity culture, the individual is sovereign. When those sovereignties overlap, tension is inevitable. The events of February 7th were not simply about a boutique refusing entry. They were about an ecosystem clarifying its boundaries. And boundaries, once clarified, rarely retreat. Yet history offers a reminder. reinvention is not impossible. Public figures have rebuilt after exile before. Institutions have reconciled after fracture. The difference lies in recalibration, in understanding the terms of engagement rather than attempting to redefine them unilaterally. The coming years will determine whether this chapter becomes a cautionary tale or a pivot point. Will independent ventures untethered from legacy houses redefine influence? Will reconciliation emerge quietly, without spectacle? Or will the distance widen into permanence? For now, the image endures. A sunlit sidewalk, 2 security guards, a polite refusal, a duke attempting diplomacy, a silent shake of the head. In that stillness, something shifted, not explosively, structurally. And structures, once adjusted, do not revert overnight. Outro plus CTA. This story was never just about fashion. It was about power, access, legacy, and the invisible rules that govern elite institutions. If this deep dive gave you clarity beyond the headlines, take 2 seconds right now and hit the like button. It tells us you value analysis over noise. Subscribe if you're new here. We don't chase rumors. We dissect structures. We follow the quiet decisions made behind closed doors. And before you go, leave one honest answer in the comments. Was this moment a necessary boundary drawn by heritage institutions, or a warning sign that modern celebrity culture is colliding with systems it doesn't fully understand? We read every response. We'll see you in the next one.